I once thought family is the safest place, but that Thanksgiving night, it was my own son-in-law who threw a plate at my head, right inside the house I had built with a lifetime of labor. He thought I would stay silent. That old age meant weakness. He didn't know. I am an engineer, and every throw leaves a mark. That night, the same hand that hurled that plate ended up cuffed under the flashing blue and red lights of a police car. And what brought him down was not revenge, but silence with a plan. If you've ever been humiliated by your own family right in your own home, stay. Because this story will show you that justice doesn't need to shout. It only needs you to know when to stay silent and when to act. Follow, turn on notifications, and comment your city so I'll know. Somewhere out there, people still believe silence can become the heaviest sentence of all. That Thanksgiving night, from the outside, the house in Timber Hollow looked perfect. Red brick walls covered with yellowing ivy, lights glowing through the windows like a painting of peace. No one could have guessed that in a few minutes, dinner would turn into a verdict. Inside, the crystal chandelier glimmered against the wine glasses, the sound of silverware tapping plates faint like cracking glass. The golden turkey lay on a silver platter my late wife, gone 10 years, had chosen for our first Thanksgiving together. Everything looked so proper that it was almost fake. "Beautiful, Robert," said Charles Holt, Gavin's father, with a stiff smile as he cut the first slice of meat. His wife Miriam laid a napkin on her lap, her eyes sweeping across the room as if appraising property. Across from me, my daughter Caroline poured wine for her husband, her hand trembling slightly, never once looking at me. Gavin sat at the head of the table, the seat that had been mine for 30 years. His navy suit fit snugly, his red tie cut like a blade. He leaned back, one leg crossed, finger tapping on the rim of his glass. "Hard to believe you still keep such a big house just for yourself," he said, half joking but his eyes measuring. I answered only with a nod. The air was thick, the scent of rosemary and butter melting on turkey skin mixed with candle smoke. Every word felt like a knife slicing through the fragile quiet. "City's booming now. Property prices are crazy," Gavin went on, setting his glass down louder than needed. "My parents have to rent a tiny apartment while you live alone in a 4-bedroom house. Doesn't that feel a bit wasteful?" I looked at Caroline. She avoided my gaze, lips pressed tight. Charles coughed softly, then added with rehearsed sympathy, "We're looking for a new place, too, Robert. Market's tough. Even a 2-bedroom costs like a small house." Miriam placed her hand on his shoulder, eyes glistening. Everything was too perfect. The lines, the tones, the fake compassion. I realized this wasn't a family dinner, but a performance. And I, the man who laid every brick of this home, had been cast as the obstacle. "Dad," Caroline finally spoke, voice small and cold, "Gavin has a point. Maybe it's time we talk about moving somewhere smaller, easier for you." The words hit the table like a stone breaking still water. It wasn't what she said, it was how light, detached, as if discussing buying furniture. I set down my fork, keeping my voice even. "I built my life in this house. Every memory of your mother lives here. So, no." A chill spread through the room. Gavin leaned back, his smile fading. "No?" he repeated, voice sharp. "Do you really think you're the only one who needs this place? That's called selfishness, Robert." I looked him in the eye. "If protecting what I built is selfish, then I accept it." The silence grew so heavy I could hear the clock tick and the drizzle outside. Then Gavin stood abruptly. The chair screeched on the wooden floor. "You live in delusion!" he shouted. "An old man clinging to a big house. Unnecessary, irrational, selfish." Charles and Miriam froze. Caroline bowed her head, hiding fear or shame. I couldn't tell. I stayed seated, hands folded on the table, voice low and steady. "If you have something to say, use reason, not rage." "Reason," he snarled, then barked. "Reason is when you think about others for once." I raised my head slowly, eyes fixed on him. Others? You mean yourself? My voice was calm, each word falling like metal. Gavin flinched, then laughed hollowly, pride wounded. You don't get it, do you? Old men like you hoard everything because you're scared of being alone. What do you live here for? Waiting to die? Gavin! Caroline gasped, but he shoved her hand away, eyes bloodshot. Be quiet. I'm talking to your father, the man who made us a joke in this family. I remained still, hands locked, voice flat as cold water. No one made you a joke, Gavin. You did that yourself when you mistook kindness for inheritance. His face stiffened. Inheritance? He hissed. Yes, because you've never created anything of worth. You crave what others built. The air shattered. Charles half rose. Miriam pulled him back. Gavin's wine toppled, red liquid spreading across the white cloth like blood through cotton. He slammed his hand down, trembling. You always think you're the winner, don't you? An old fool thinking the world still respects him. I tilted my head, eyes calm, judgmental. No, I just remember clearly. The man who once begged to borrow money to start his real estate firm never paid back a cent. Shut up, he roared, face blazing. I replied softly, almost whispering, Are you talking about generosity or about the house? The question sliced through the last thin skin of pretense. Gavin lunged up. The chair crashed over, scraping hard against wood. Enough! You selfish, arrogant old man clinging to the past. You don't deserve this house. And in that instant he grabbed the plate before him, eyes burning like fire reignited. The plate flew, fast, cold, precise, driven by anger long stored. The crash thundered like a storm. The rim grazed my temple, leaving a hot sting, porcelain shards scattered, turkey splattered, and gravy dripping down the table leg. For a moment, everyone froze. I touched my temple, feeling warmth and pulse. No blood, just a bruise forming. I rose slowly, said nothing, looked at no one. Gavin stood rigid, arm trembling, fury turning into fear. Caroline covered her mouth but didn't move. I spoke quietly, barely above a whisper. I'll leave. No one stopped me. No one apologized. Only ragged breaths and the smell of cooling food filled that elegant room. I walked through the hardwood hallway I'd installed years ago, past the wedding photo of Linda and me on the stairway, oak frame, a small crack I'd never fixed. I opened the door, the cold November air rushing in. Outside was eerily still. Standing beside my silver pickup, I looked back at the house, lights still blazing, their shadows flickering behind curtains. In my coat pocket, my phone buzzed. I typed a short message. Our plan worked, and sent it to Lauren Denton, the lawyer friend who'd helped me prepare for this night. Slipping the phone back, I took a deep breath and said softly to myself, Justice has just begun. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, I was pulling weeds along the flower bed outside the study window when I heard Gavin's familiar footsteps slip into the house through the side door. I was about to stand and greet him when his phone connected a call, right at the study door, where the window was left ajar for air. His voice came through, dragging the end of each sentence like a baited line already hooked to a fish. Holt Realty LLC won't get bank approval without strong enough collateral. Yes, Timber Hollow. My father-in-law doesn't use the whole place. Just need to persuade him to move into a small condo, and it's done. He paused, then chuckled lightly. No cash needed. Just rent the old house for $3,500 a month during the capital rotation. Charles will put it in his name to be safe. Outside in the garden, I gripped the rosemary stem so hard the scent hit my nose sharp enough to sting my eyes. In my hands, the dark soil crumbled into clumps, exactly like the way his words were scratching at my memories of this house. In that moment, I understood his plan. To turn the house, the fruit of 30 years' work and Linda's only legacy, into temporary collateral for the shell company, Holt Realty LLC. A twofold move, raise working capital, and push me out of the only space that still held my wife's and my child's memories. He didn't just want the house, he wanted control. and Caroline, whether unwittingly or deliberately, would be the legal key to legitimize it all. I did not step in to interrupt. I stayed silent, retreated under the eave, listened to the part where he told Caroline, "Don't be soft," when he mentions his mother, then snapped the phone shut like closing a door. Then I knew this would no longer be a family dinner, but a battlefield. And every battlefield needs a plan. That afternoon, I called Lauren Denton. We had worked together when we were young. I, a bridge engineer, she a lawyer who liked things straight as steel beams. The cafe at Memorial Park still smelled of new wood and lightly roasted coffee. Lauren showed up with a pair of worn file folders, hair tied back, the practiced smile of someone who'd weathered many court seasons. I told her exactly what I had heard, not a word more. She didn't interrupt, only took notes. When I stopped, Lauren closed her pen. "If you're right, they'll use filial duty to hide a money motive. You can't argue at the dinner table. You have to win on paper." The plan was sketched like an engineering drawing. Each column, each joint. Lauren spoke briskly and cleanly, no book needed. Texas is a one-party consent state. You can record if you participate in the conversation. Just avoid private spaces. Cameras likewise. You're the homeowner, so it's legal. Place one corner to see the whole dining table. No need for audio. She slid a sheet of paper to me, jotting bullet points. Test the device. Photograph placements. Email to yourself. Timestamp. "And if things go further," she said, "you go to Memorial Hermann. See Dr. Patel. I've said it ahead of time. You'll get photos, diagnosis, and medical records. Everything must follow procedure." She called a friend on the police force, Detective Alicia Rains. I only heard half the call, a few words like family tension, possible escalation, stand by. Lauren hung up and looked at me. "If needed, they'll be there in 5 minutes. But you must stay calm. Do not provoke. Do not fight back. Let them prove themselves." I nodded. In engineering, a small margin of error can topple an entire bridge. In justice, a single wrong reaction can collapse the whole case. That evening, I cleared the wooden cabinet under the stairs, where Linda used to store table linens. I spread out folders, a felt pen, the leather notebook, a camera, and the small recorder Lauren had given me. I read aloud into the device. "The 11th of November, 20 hours 15 minutes. Robert Whitmore, device serial set, at the dining room, test 1. My voice rang softly and bounced off the wooden ceiling. I placed the recorder behind the head chair, the one Gavin liked. A mini camera matched to the wall color peered through the crystal, enough to catch every movement. I photographed 3 angles, printed them, signed them, and emailed them to myself. Placement photos, Timber Hollow, 11th of November, 2040. 2 days later, Caroline texted, "Dad, let's have an early Thanksgiving dinner at the house on Sunday evening?" I replied briefly. "Okay." Minutes later, Lauren called back. "Good. I've alerted Rains for that shift. Keep things normal. Have your papers and the route to the hospital ready. And remember, nothing is random." That night, I drove a dry run to Memorial Hermann. The ER lights were cold and reflected off the glass boards. I parked and counted 43 steps from the car to the door. I needed to know every detail, even where I would go if things crossed the line. On the way back, I stopped at the corner store and bought a small roll of tape to mark the recorder placement, a tiny dot under the table runner, subtle enough that only I would notice. Back at home, I tested the recording once more. Standing close to the head of the table, I said a few idle lines and then stepped back to the kitchen. The audio was clear. I saved the file, created an authentication code, and printed the report. Careful, not because of fear, but because each detail was the only railing between me and chaos. When the checklist was complete, my mind kept returning to the previous call. Holt Realty, LLC. I opened my laptop and drew a simple diagram, the house in the center. Branch 1, debt. Branch 2, motive. Branch 3, the guise of filial piety. I noted, if there's pre-approval, there will be an email. If there's a partner, there will be messages. Money leaves traces. 3 days before dinner, I told Lauren over the phone, I will not provoke. If he crosses the line, the machine will record. If not, I only need the truth. Lauren replied softly, You do not need to win with anger. You win with the space between his words and his actions. The next evening, I invited Charles and Miriam over to try a pie, using Thanksgiving rehearsal as an excuse. Miriam inspected every corner like a broker checking inventory. Charles counted chairs. When they left, I stood on the porch, breathing in the damp wood and the oven's lingering scent. Some smells foretell rain, and some signs foretell a storm. The morning after, Lauren sent me a PDF titled Documentation Timeline. Each line is a step, each step a measured breath of the plan. At the end, she had written by hand, Don't improvise. Let evidence breathe. The night before Thanksgiving, I took the silver platter Linda had chosen and set it at the center of the table, inspecting it like an engineer testing a bridge before opening day. A bridge is secure only when bolts are tightened to specification. Justice is the same. I left in the truck my coat, the papers, a bottle of water, and a cold pack, not hoping for violence, but prepared if it came. Thanksgiving morning, Houston wore a gray overcast like a thin slab of concrete. I polished the table, tested the mic, checked the tiny tape dot under the runner, small as a crossmark on a blueprint. I made coffee and waited for the aroma. As the hour approached, I locked the side door, turned on the hallway lights, and breathed deeply. In my head, I repeated Lauren's 4 lines. Sit up straight, place your hands on the table. Speak softly. Do not resist. When the doorbell rang, my heart did not race more than usual. I had built the bridge. If someone drove a car into the railing, that would be their choice. And the systems work. I opened the door. Miriam's perfume preceded her greeting. Charles carried a bottle of wine. Caroline avoided my eyes, and Gavin came in last, his red tie like a slash. He sat in the head chair. I poured wine, served the turkey to each person, keeping my voice steady. The recorder lay still, silent as a third eye waiting for the right moment. And when I heard the red flare in Gavin's eyes after the words, "You're selfish," I heard Lauren in my head, the phrase that had guided the entire design for the night. Short, cold, and precise as an ASTM spec on an engineering drawing. If he throws the first punch, we win everything. That night, I drove to Memorial Hermann Hospital. The road from Timber Hollow to the highway was silent as still water. I didn't turn on the radio. The wind slipped through the window crack, sounding like a guitar string about to snap. Each heartbeat throbbed at my temple, burning and sharp. I drove slowly, right at the speed limit, gripping the steering wheel tight, as if one small twitch could shatter 3 weeks of planning. In the hospital parking lot, white sodium lights reflected off the windshield, cold and metallic. I sat for a few seconds before opening the door, took a deep breath, and stepped out. The automatic doors parted, releasing the smell of disinfectant and the hum of monitors. "Head injury?" the nurse asked quickly, but not coldly. I nodded. "Fall or hit?" she asked again. "Assault," I said shortly. No need to explain. She glanced at the purpling bruise on my temple and called out, "Dr. Patel, room 4. Dr. Patel came in, a tall man around 40, calm voice, steady tone. He shone a light into my pupils and gently touched the bruise with his gloved fingertips. Direct impact, not a fall. Likely thrown object. Any dizziness or nausea? Not much. Just pain. Good. He nodded, signaling the nurse to ready the camera. I sat still while they photographed. Front view, left angle, right angle, close up. The flashes burst repeatedly, bouncing off the white wall, harsh and blinding. Dr. Patel took notes in the chart, voice mechanical. Deep contusion, no skin break. 3.2 centimeters in diameter. Injury consistent with a near-range throw. Recommend mild concussion observation. When I signed the form, he asked, "Do you have an attorney?" "Yes." She's on her way. Good. I'll prepare a copy of the file and photos. Here's the HIPAA release form. Sign here so she can access the records. I signed. My handwriting trembled slightly, but remained legible. Dr. Patel nodded, sealed the envelope, and signed the chain of custody form. Everything is now officially logged in the medical system. You did the right thing. I waited for the CT scan results. In the reflective screen, my face looked unfamiliar, half in shadow, half in light, like two men staring at each other through frosted glass. One part was the victim, the other, the one who had planned this moment. About 30 minutes later, Lauren arrived. Gray coat, hair tied low, familiar leather case under her arm. You okay? She asked, eyes pausing on the swelling. I only nodded. She glanced at the sealed envelope, read the label, and said softly, Good. Dr. Patel's meticulous. Photos, diagnosis, medical certification, all time-stamped. No one can undo that. She opened her folder, pulling out a pre-printed sheet. Texas Penal Code, Section 22.01. Intentionally or recklessly causing bodily injury to another person is an offense. With witnesses, it qualifies as domestic assault. You have both. Her tone was even and cold, no dramatics needed. I looked out the window. Rain had started, droplets glittering on the glass like shattered crystal. Lauren took a call. That's Alicia Raines, she murmured. They've heard from the neighbors. Police are en route to your house. I said nothing. My mind replayed the dining room light, the fallen chair, the echo of the breaking plate. All of it is now a crime scene, and I knew it would be processed by the book. Near 10 o'clock, Lauren received another call. She stood, listened briefly, then turned to me. Raines is there. They're separating everyone for statements. I just nodded. I could picture it perfectly. Blue and red lights flashing through the window, porcelain shards, the investigator's pen scratching across paper, Charles stammering, Miriam weeping, Caroline silent, and Gavin, probably still wearing that half-smile, thinking he could outtalk the truth. Less than an hour later, a text from Raines appeared on Lauren's phone. Suspect detained. Rights read. Witness statements are consistent. Lauren finished reading, lifted her gaze, and said quietly, You did well, Robert. From here, the system takes over. I leaned back, exhaled. Outside, the patrol lights reflected on the hospital wall. Red, blue, white. The colors of justice when done right. That night in Timber Hollow, neighbors stood on porches filming. They saw Gavin handcuffed, head bowed, still trying to speak in vain. Miriam screamed. Charles pleaded with officers, and Caroline stood frozen. The flashing lights painted Gavin's face, a sight no one ever wants to see on a family. When the cruiser doors shut, the metallic click of the cuffs sounded final, a full stop ending the first chapter of the verdict. At the hospital, I sat still, cold pack in hand, eyes closed. My phone buzzed. A text from Lauren. It's done. Rest. I set the phone down and drew a deep breath. The pain in my temple lingered, but my pulse was steady again. For the first time in months, I felt true silence, not the silence of endurance, but the silence of justice beginning to move. And as the sound of handcuffs echoed in memory, I knew. From that moment on, the silence finally belonged to me. The morning after the arrest, Houston was covered in a thin gray mist, like a layer of dusted memories still clinging to the skin. I sat by the living room window, coffee cup in hand, quietly watching the first light of day crawl across the curtains. The house was so silent I could hear the wood expanding from the temperature change. On the table, my phone lay still. I knew it would ring eventually. And it did, around 8 o'clock. The name Caroline flashed on the screen. I picked up. On the other end came sobs. Broken, choked, uneven. Dad, did you call the police? How could you do that to our family? I didn't answer right away. I waited for her to calm down, then spoke slowly, clearly. No, Caroline. I didn't call the police on family. I called the police on assault. But, he just lost control, she cried out, her voice breaking with desperation. No, my dear, I said, still calm. Losing control is when someone throws words. He threw something real. He made a choice, and choices have consequences. The line went quiet for a few seconds, only her faint breathing and the sound of traffic passing outside. Finally she whispered, Dad, everyone's saying you're trying to ruin him. I closed my eyes, my voice low. I don't need to ruin anyone. The truth will do that by itself. She went silent. I heard her trying not to cry before hanging up. I set the phone down and looked outside. The sun had risen, but the light was weak, pale, like a warning. I knew this day would be long, not because of fatigue, but because the machine of justice had begun to turn, and I would have to watch each gear move. Around 9:30, Detective Alicia Raines called. Her voice was even dry, with the rhythm of someone who lived by procedure. Mr. Whitmore, we're collecting evidence at the scene. You have cameras in your home, correct? Yes. I notified my lawyer beforehand and have photos of the setup. Good. I'll need a copy of the memory card and the placement photos. We've also collected plate fragments, the stained tablecloth, and remaining food. The lab will analyze blood traces and fingerprints. I listened and wrote everything down. Her tone reminded me of my old colleagues in engineering. Precise, ordered, emotionless. Justice, like a bridge, can't be built with anger. It must be built with data. That afternoon, Lauren arrived carrying a new folder, labeled Case Known 24-7754, State of Texas versus Gavin Holt. Raines has completed the initial report, she said, setting the folder on the table. They have at least 3 witnesses, 2 neighbors heard shouting, and the crash. One filmed the patrol lights and Gavin being cuffed. The home footage will seal it. I checked it. The audio and visuals are crystal clear. She opened her laptop and played a short clip. The image appeared. The dining room. Chandelier light gleaming. A fallen chair. A messy table. Me sitting still while Gavin shouted. His voice rang out clearly. You're selfish. You don't deserve this house. Then they throw. The plate shattering, my hand rising to my head. The frame froze there. Lauren stopped the video, closed the laptop, and said softly, That alone proves intentional violence. Outside, a police car pulled up briefly. Detective Raines entered, dark gray coat, evidence bag in hand. Mr. Whitmore, I need to confirm the camera placement. I led her to the dining room. The morning's coffee scent still lingered, mixing with dish soap. She looked around, took photos, checked the angles, and then signed the report. The device was legally installed and documented before the incident. This video will enter the evidence system. She pointed to a shard of plate near the buffet. We collected most of it, but kept one piece for fingerprint comparison. We also interviewed Gavin's parents. They claimed it was an accident, but the fracture line and fall angle show a direct throw. No one accidentally does that from that distance. I nodded. In the afternoon light, the bruise on my temple had darkened to deep purple. I held the cold pack against it, listening as Raines summarized the report. Samples delivered to the forensics lab. Video duplicated, SA-256 certified. The official report will reach ADA Marcus Hale within 48 hours. Lauren took notes quietly. When Raines left, she closed her notebook and looked at me. You know, she said, the hardest part of justice isn't proving guilt. It's waiting for it to be recognized. I met her eyes, my tone steady. Waiting doesn't scare me. I've waited 10 years for Linda's pain to fade. 3 more weeks won't matter. She nodded, gathering the files. Good. Stay quiet. No social media, no contact. I'll handle the rest. That evening I stood on the porch watching Timber Hollow under soft yellow lights. Every house was lit, but every curtain closed, people curious, yet afraid to ask. Across the street, old Mrs. Mildred stood beneath the oak tree, giving me a small nod, the kind reserved for someone who has just weathered a storm. Back in my study, I opened the black notebook and wrote a single line. November the 28th. Phase 1 evidence complete. I paused, took a deep breath, then added, but this is only the surface. The real crime still hides behind the glass. The desk lamp reflected off the paper, glowing faintly like moonlight spread across wooden floors. I closed the notebook and looked out the window. Outside, the garden was dark, silent, cold, and waiting, just like me. But this is only the first stage of evidence. The real crime is yet to be revealed. 3 days after Gavin's arrest, Lauren called me to her office in downtown Houston. It was a tall glass building gleaming like the edge of a freshly sharpened blade. In the small conference room on the 6th floor, sunlight streamed through the window, casting across a thick stack of files on the table. The cover labeled Holt Realty, LLC, Financial Review. Lauren stood beside the projector, her voice steady and sharp as if she were reading an indictment. We found the motive, Robert, and it's not just the house. She opened the first slide. On screen appeared a bank statement. Gavin's credit card frozen with over $75,000 in debt, 3 overdue small loans, and 2 car payments past due by 80 days. He's drowning. His parents are being asked to vacate their rental. Everything lines up with when he started targeting you. I said nothing, staring at the numbers. Each debt line was a crack in the polished facade he'd built. Lauren clicked to the next slide. And here's the interesting part. The emails between him and a man named Travis Cole, a loan officer at First Houston Bank. She pointed at a bolded line. Loan pre-approval, Holt Realty, LLC. Collateral required $800,000. Primary residence. I took the printout and read every word carefully. $800,000 in collateral, the exact appraised value of the Timber Hollow house. I went still. Every final piece fell into place. He didn't want me out of the house because of pride or tension. He needed it as collateral to rescue his collapsing company. Lauren continued, voice cool and precise. According to the emails, he planned to transfer temporary ownership to Holt Realty, LLC, under a trust agreement. The secondary name listed is Charles Holt, his father. Then they intended to rent the property to raise capital for 6 months. If you had signed any document during that dinner, they would have filed the loan paperwork the next morning. I leaned back, palms cold. Everything was prearranged, I murmured. Lauren nodded, line by line, the entire plan's in this Excel file. She opened her laptop and projected the spreadsheet. Columns filled the wall. Projected rent, $3,500. Mortgage leverage, projected ROI, Q1 2025. In the corner, file name, Holt Plan, timberhollow.xls. Creation date, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. Last modified 1 day before the dinner. The final column read, Robert signs, proceed. The room fell silent. Only the faint hum of the air conditioner filled the space, steady and cold. I stared at the spreadsheet, at that small phrase, Robert signs, proceed, as if seeing my own forged signature in his design. I exhaled slowly. He calculated everything, I said softly. But he forgot one thing. Engineers always double-check the blueprint before pouring the concrete. Lauren gave a faint smile. And now we'll use his financial plan as evidence. I've already subpoenaed the full email chain. Metadata and timestamps align perfectly. This will serve as the primary motive in the prosecution file. By noon, I left her office. Houston's heat shimmered off the pavement like molten metal. Driving back to Timber Hollow, I opened my study. On the wall hung the original blueprint of the house, old pencil lines, precise to the millimeter. I took a black pen, spread the copied documents, and began drawing another kind of diagram. Not a bridge, not a house, but a timeline of failure. I numbered each stage. 1, week 1, credit card debt maxed out. 2, week 2, Holt Realty submitted the bank loan file. 3, week 3, Caroline suggested moving to something more convenient. 4, week 4, Thanksgiving dinner. The throw. I connected the dots with thin ink lines, like an engineer tracing the cause of a bridge collapse. Every structural flaw leaves a trace. Every financial crime does too. With a red pen, I circled collateral $800,000 and wrote beside it, motivation confirmed. That afternoon, Lorne emailed me a short report. Ada Marcus Hale will add charges of attempted fraud and coercion. At the bottom, she'd written by hand. He underestimated the man who builds blueprints for a living. I read it twice, then looked up at the drawing before me. The late-day sun streamed through the window, striking each ink line until it gleamed like forged steel. I realized I no longer needed to speak to Gavin. I had already built a bridge, the one he would walk across, straight to the other side of justice. I folded the documents and slid them into the drawer. In my mind, one sentence remained: clean, cold, and exact as a formula. He thought I only built bridges, but in truth, I built a trap. 2 weeks after Gavin's arrest and release on bail, the first envelope from the Harris County Court arrived in my mailbox. Thick, heavy, and carefully sealed, as if it carried an accusation instead of a defense. In the top left corner, bold letters read, Marcus Webb and Associates, Defense Counsel. I knew that name. Marcus Webb was the attorney who specialized in sensitive family disputes, famous for turning abusers into emotionally misunderstood men. Lauren called him the man who bends truth with a gentle tone. I opened the envelope. Inside was a counterclaim, 8 pages long, accusing me of prolonged psychological manipulation, financial control, and emotional coercion toward the son-in-law. At the bottom, the italicized signature of Gavin Holt, and beneath it, a sworn statement by Caroline Holt, my daughter. I read every word, leaving none untouched. The first line of her statement chilled me. I confirm that my father, Robert Whitmore, often insulted and belittled my husband in private conversations. I stopped, not out of anger, but because the phrasing was too familiar, as if copied from a script someone else had written. Lauren came that afternoon. She spread the documents across the table, her eyes cold as glass. I expected this. Marcus Webb is shifting to a counterclaim for elder abuse. If they convince the court you're the emotional aggressor, the jury could blur the line between victim and perpetrator. She looked up, voice even. You must stay completely calm. No emotional reactions. Everything now lives in documents, not in words. I nodded. I understand. And I'm ready. I stood, opened the drawer beside my desk, and took out a small black external hard drive. This holds all recordings from the 6 weeks before the incident. I activated it whenever he was in the house, speaking on the phone or with Caroline, within Texas's one-party consent law, since I was present and the homeowner. Every file is time-stamped, with a cloud backup. Lauren opened her laptop and checked the list. The file names were simple, each with clear dates. 2024 Amaya Fairn Driveway Talk, MP3, 2024 Leave S12 Kitchen Conversation.mp3, 2024 Lit 19 Phone Call Shake Garage, MP3. She played the second one. The audio was clean, no interference. Gavin's voice came through deep and confident. Gavin, all he needs to do is sign the temporary transfer of use form. With that signature, the bank approves the loan. Timber Hollow becomes the collateral. Caroline, what if Dad asks about Mom? Gavin, just say it's for convenience to give him more space. He gets soft when you mention her. He'll sign, trust me. Lauren looked up, eyes sharpening. This isn't just financial manipulation, it's emotional engineering. He used your wife's memory to coerce you into signing. I nodded quietly. I know, and I let them speak freely. Every word recorded, all within the law, right inside the house they planned to steal. Lauren stared at the screen once more, then said slowly, So you have 3 recordings, enough to prove the full timeline, from intent to action. I replied, Each file is a stone. Together they form the bridge he built to his own downfall. That night, I sat alone in my study, the desk lamp reflecting off old blueprints. I opened the black notebook and wrote a single line. December 12th. Counterattack begins. Then I unfolded Caroline's statement again. Her signature trembled, not from fear of me, but from being led astray. I knew because she'd never written Whitmore without looking up to meet my eyes with apology. Near midnight, Lauren texted, Raines confirmed both camera and audio recordings are fully legal. Webb can't motion for suppression. I reread it several times, then set the phone down. Outside, rain began tapping against the window frame, steady as the rhythm of patience. I felt no anger toward Gavin, nor resentment toward Caroline. I simply knew that anyone convinced they can twist truth will eventually fall into the hole they dug themselves. I wouldn't push them in. I'd just wait for the ground to give way. I closed the notebook and looked up at the framed bridge sketch on my wall. The steel beams ran parallel, symmetrical, never crossing. There was no anger in it, only logic. I'll let them dig their own hole, I thought, the corner of my mouth lifting into a cold smile, and I'll bring the shovel to court. 3 days after Marcus Webb filed the counterclaim, Lauren asked me to meet her at the Harris County office. It was raining steadily in Houston, the water streaking down the windshield like the lines of an old map. I drove through downtown where tall glass towers reflected the pale, distant glow of streetlights, cold and impersonal. When I pulled into the parking lot, I saw Lauren waiting by the entrance, with a long coat and a dark gray umbrella. One side of her hair was wet, but her eyes were as sharp as a freshly honed blade. Inside the office, she opened a new file and placed it between us. It's time, Robert. We're officially submitting the recordings. I nodded, pulling the black external drive from my coat pocket and setting it beside her laptop. 3 recordings, all within legal bounds. I backed them up to the cloud and emailed a copy to myself, self-time-stamped. Lauren connected the device, her movements precise, almost ritualistic. The screen lit up with the folder, Timber Hollow Recordings. She selected the file dated November 12th and hit play. Rain and voices filled the small room. Gavin, I've already printed the deed template. All he has to do is sign here. Tell him it's just for the rental paperwork. Caroline, and if he refuses? Gavin, then pressure him. Use emotions. Mention his wife. That's his weak spot. Lauren paused the playback. For several seconds, only the sound of rain tapping the window filled the silence. Then she exhaled and said quietly, That's a perfect confession. Intent, method, motive, and, most importantly, all legally recorded. She picked up her pen and wrote swiftly in the report, Recording obtained under Texas Penal Code, Section 16.02, One-Party Consent Law. Subject within residence owned by participant. Recording admissible as evidence. Then she looked up. You're the homeowner and part of the conversation. No one can suppress this evidence. I nodded, my voice low. I don't need them to believe me. They just need to hear him. We left the office to meet with the prosecutor, ADA Marcus Hale. A dark-skinned man with a firm voice and steady eyes, he radiated quiet authority. Lauren introduced us briefly, then played the second clip, the one where Gavin discussed borrowing, his father's name to mask the transaction. Gavin, if needed, we'll have Charles listed. The bank just needs legal collateral. The old man won't understand a thing. Marcus listened without a word. When the audio ended, he simply said, Get me the warrant. That night, Lauren texted, Raines is drafting the search warrant for the Holtz house. The DA has signed the preliminary order. We'll have the official copy tomorrow. I read her message, glancing outside. The rain still falling, fine drops striking the pavement like sparks on steel. The story had already reached the local news. Channel 5 ran a short piece. A retired engineer in Timber Hollow was assaulted during Thanksgiving dinner. Sources say the case involves complex financial elements. Beneath the article, hundreds of comments, some condemning, some sympathetic, others saying, The old man probably provoked it. I stopped reading. Public opinion is a muddy river. I had no intention of wading in to prove my innocence. Around 11 that night, Lauren called. Raines has the warrant. Tomorrow they'll search the Holt's home. Cameras, computers, forged contracts, everything will be seized. I replied softly, Thank you. And Lauren, Yes? I looked down at my desk, the black notebook still open to the previous page. Tomorrow, the microphones won't have to hide anymore. She gave a faint laugh, the kind that carried cold empathy. You're right, Robert. Tomorrow, they'll hear themselves. I set the phone down, turned off the lights, and left only the desk lamp glowing over the old house blueprint. The lines were clean, sharp, like the architecture of justice itself, silent, precise, and unshakable. I closed the notebook slowly, and one thought echoed through my mind. Tomorrow, the microphones will no longer be hidden. The next morning, as the first sunlight slipped through my study window, Lauren called. Her voice was calm but firm. The warrant was signed at 10:34 last night. Raines's team moves at 6. I replied briefly, I won't be there. Good. Let them do their job. I sat at my desk, a warm cup of coffee in hand. Outside, Houston was cool and still. The whole Timber Hollow neighborhood seemed to be holding its breath. I watched the clock tick past 6:10, then 6:20. With every minute, I pictured the other side of the city, where everything Gavin had hidden for the past 3 months was about to be laid bare like a flawed blueprint. At that same moment, at a small apartment in Midtown Houston, where Gavin and Caroline had been staying after the no-contact order, 4 patrol cars from the Harris County Sheriff's Office stopped quietly in front of the building. Another unmarked silver-gray car arrived, driven by Detective Alicia Raines. Beside her sat Mark Keller, the private investigator Lauren had hired for digital forensics, a thin man with glasses and a black laptop bag labeled Forensic Tools, a former FBI IT analyst. Raines gave a signal. The dark wooden door of Unit 3B remained shut. She knocked 3 firm times. Houston Police, we have a search warrant. No response. A pause, then hurried footsteps behind the Daughter. Raines nodded. 2 officers turned the handle. The warrant signed. Go in. The door swung open. Gavin stood in the living room, rumpled t-shirt, eyes red from lack of sleep. Caroline stood behind him, gripping the edge of the table. On the dining table sat an open laptop, the screen still lit, its title bar clear. POA, Draft, PDF. Raines stepped forward, her tone metallic. Mr. Holt, this is a search warrant authorized by the Harris County Court concerning the investigation of forgery and guardianship fraud. Gavin tried to steady himself. There must be some mistake. Keller was already at the laptop, gloved hands moving with precision. No mistake, he murmured. The file was edited last night at 22:17. Metadata doesn't lie. Raines motioned for evidence collection. Computers, phones, hard drives, all sealed into numbered evidence bags. In the bedroom, officers found a box labeled Dad's Health. Inside were printed copies of a medical evaluation form, bearing a forged signature of Dr. Raj Patel, the same doctor who had treated me. Next to it, 3 unfinished drafts, printed on cheap inkjet paper, the ink still smudged. Raines unfolded one sheet, examined it, and handed it to Keller. Check the handwriting. Keller shone a UV light over it. Not the same signature. Pressure pattern off, angle inconsistent. Crude forgery. Caroline collapsed into a chair, face in her hands. Gavin shouted, desperate. I was just researching guardianship procedures. I wasn't trying to harm anyone. Raines stepped closer, her voice precise and unyielding. Gavin Holt, you are under arrest for forgery of medical documents, attempted guardianship fraud, and conspiracy to commit property theft, under Section 32.21 of the Texas Penal Code. She turned to the officers. Read him his rights. The handcuffs clicked, sharp and final. Gavin froze, head bowed, the red-blue lights from the patrol cars flashing across his pale face. Neighbors gathered in the hallway. One raised a phone, recording. Rains didn't stop them. She understood. Some verdicts deserve witnesses. When Gavin was escorted out, the video appeared on the Timber Hollow HOA residents' Facebook group within 2 minutes. The headline read, "Engineer's son-in-law arrested this morning for forging medical documents." Comments poured in, curiosity, mockery, outrage, and I, still at home, watched the sunlight fill my window, knowing justice had climbed one step higher. That afternoon, Lauren called. Dr. Patel confirmed it. He never signed any such evaluation. The forensic lab matched the paper and ink. They're identical stock, but the signature structure is completely different. She paused. "What's he claiming to the police?" I answered quietly. "He'll probably say he was just protecting an elderly man. But Lauren, he never wanted to protect me." I looked out through the window, my voice heavy. "He only wanted to erase me from everything." 3 days after the arrest, Houston woke to a headline stretched across the front page of the Houston Chronicle. "Retired engineer targeted in guardianship scam by his own son-in-law." Beneath it was a photograph of Gavin being led out of the Midtown apartment in handcuffs, head bowed, the red and blue lights from patrol cars cutting through the faint morning fog. The article was short, but enough to shake the community. According to the Harris County office, suspects Gavin Holt and his wife, Caroline Holt, are accused of falsifying medical documents to declare Caroline's father legally incapacitated in an attempt to seize property valued at over $800,000. The case is being prosecuted under Section 32.21 of the Texas Penal Code. I read the article that Monday morning while making coffee. The beans hit the grinder with a crisp, rhythmic sound. On the table, the paper lay flat, the scent of fresh ink mingling with bitter roast. I didn't smile, nor did I feel triumphant, only the steady certainty of a steel bridge tested for load and still standing firm. At Holt Realty LLC, where Gavin had worked part-time, the office felt like a funeral. A young manager collected his ID badge and signed a termination violation of company ethics policy form. His nameplate, Gavin Holt, sales consultant, was removed and placed in a box. "Can't have his face representing the firm when it's plastered all over the news," a co-worker whispered, eyes flickering between fear and satisfaction. Meanwhile, at the architecture firm where Caroline worked, whispers echoed down the hallways. "That's the daughter of the engineer in the article. They say they even forged medical records." Caroline walked past, hearing every word but saying nothing. When she got home, her mailbox was filled with letters from the Professional Ethics Board, each one demanding a written explanation regarding involvement in a family-related financial misconduct case. In Timber Hollow, Gavin's parents, Charles and Miriam, lived in a silence heavier than shame. That Sunday at St. Peter's Chapel, only a few parishioners greeted them, with eyes that quickly turned away. Miriam tried to smile, but no one smiled back. A woman whispered behind them, "That's the Holt family, right? You heard? Their son forged his father-in-law's medical records." Charles lowered his head, his worn coat frayed at the cuffs, his footsteps hollow against the wooden floor. When the priest approached, he murmured, "I pray they understand. There's no such thing as a small sin when it wounds trust." As for me, I said nothing. I didn't post, didn't answer reporters, didn't reply to the messages that said, "Congratulations on your victory." I simply opened my black notebook and wrote one slow, deliberate line. Justice doesn't need applause. Sunlight slipped through the blinds, casting a pale stripe across the page. I looked out at the yard, where the oak trees stretched long shadows across the red brick wall. In that stillness, I could hear my heartbeat. Slow, steady, no longer angry, just resolute. Justice, I thought, isn't an echo. It's a structure built on evidence, designed to bear weight. Lauren called near dusk. Rains just filed the complete report. The court will set the trial within 6 to 8 weeks. The DA's keeping both charges, assault and forgery. Webb has no room to negotiate. I answered simply, Good. Don't drag it out. I want to hear the verdict, not the apology. You'll have both, she said evenly. But I think what you'll value most is their silence. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. Outside, the sunset burned red against the brick wall, just like the spilled wine that Thanksgiving night when everything began. I closed the notebook and looked toward the fading light. In my mind, one sentence rang out, cold and clear as steel striking stone. The trial isn't over yet. They still have to hear their own verdict. On the day of sentencing, the sky over Houston was pale and colorless, sunlight filtering through like it had to fight its way past frosted glass. I arrived at the Harris County Courthouse an hour early and stood on the granite plaza, staring at the great glass doors where every word spoken inside would decide the fate of those who once called me family. Inside, courtroom 204 glowed under the cold white of fluorescent lights. 2 Channel 7 cameras sat in the back corner, lenses fixed on the defense table. In the front row, a Houston Chronicle reporter scribbled nonstop. The court had granted limited media access. The engineer guardianship fraud case had dominated headlines for 3 weeks. When I entered, heads turned. Gavin sat at the defense table, hands clasped, face pale and thin, eyes unfocused. Beside him, Caroline bowed her head, fingers knotted until her knuckles turned white. Their attorney, Marcus Webb, sat motionless, files stacked neatly before him, but the usual confidence was gone from his face. At the prosecution's table, ADA Marcus Hale, a man I knew from community projects, stood tall, his voice ringing clear and heavy as iron. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today you will see the truth presented through evidence, not excuses. He began with the first image, a photo taken at Memorial Hermann ER, the bruise on my temple visible under harsh light. Then came the video of Dr. Patel comparing the authentic and forged signatures, side by side on the large screen. The courtroom fell silent as Hale said, "This was not merely document fraud. It was a calculated attempt to erase the legal existence of a man still fully competent." Lauren sat beside me, taking notes. I watched as Dr. Patel took the witness stand, still in his white coat, holding my real medical file. "I examined Mr. Whitmore 6 months ago," he said. "No cognitive decline. The signature on the defendant's document was forged, copied from a template stored in the insurance system. This was deliberate." Then Hale pressed a button. The recording from 6 weeks earlier filled the courtroom, Gavin's own voice. "All he has to do is sign the transfer papers, and I'll handle the rest. Just tell him it's to change the scenery." A few people exhaled sharply. Reporters bent over their notebooks. Gavin bowed his head, sweating, fingers trembling. Caroline's shoulders shook. When the playback ended, no one spoke. They didn't have to. Hale closed his argument quietly. "You don't have to believe the prosecution. Just believe what you heard." Judge Rebecca Hart leaned toward the microphone. "The court has heard enough." She motioned to the clerk. "Defendant, please rise." Gavin obeyed, unsteady as though his strength had drained away. "Mr. Gavin Holt," the judge's voice filled the room, "you are hereby found guilty of assault, causing bodily injury, and forgery of medical documents with intent to defraud. Sentence: 3 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and $60,000 in restitution to the plaintiff, Robert Whitmore." She turned to Caroline. "Mrs. Caroline Holt, the court recognizes that you were influenced, yet you remain accountable as an accomplice. 1 year of supervised probation, mandatory completion of an ethics counseling program, and submission of a formal public apology." No one spoke. The only sounds were the clicks of camera shutters, flashes glinting off the polished tile. Gavin's hands shook. Caroline broke into tears, but no one reached out. Marcus Hale gathered his files, approached me, and said softly, "Justice done, old friend." I nodded without speaking. The judge's gavel struck once, sharp, final. The sound echoed through the courtroom, hanging in the air between an ending and a beginning. I closed my eyes and felt it reverberate. not as punishment, but as justice exhaling after finishing its work. The gavel fell, and silence accomplished what words never could. 3 weeks after the trial, the official judgment appeared on the Harris County Court's online docket. Cold, emotionless text. But to me, every line beat like the steady pulse of justice. State of Texas versus Gavin Holt. Sentence, 3 years probation, $60,000 restitution, 200 hours community service. State of Texas versus Caroline Holt. Deferred adjudication, 1 year probation, mandatory apology letter, and ethics counseling. I read each word slowly, the way an engineer studies the final blueprint of his last bridge. Precise, solid, and free of error. The news spread quickly. Within a week, the Houston Chronicle published the verdict with a simple commentary. Justice served quietly in Timber Hollow. Daughter's silence broke a father's heart, but the law restored balance. Gavin began his community service at the city's Public Works Maintenance Division, ironically the same place I had once overseen bridge projects 30 years ago. I didn't go to see him, but Lauren told me he wears a reflective vest, cleans debris under the Memorial Bridge. Each month, the department sends a report confirming his completed hours. The $60,000 restitution came in 36 installments. The first check arrived on January 15th, a plain white envelope stamped restitution payment. Case number 24-1098H. I didn't open it, just placed it in the drawer. Caroline wrote her apology letter as ordered. It was submitted through Lauren during the court review hearing. She read it aloud before the judge and the prosecutor. I, Caroline Holt, admit that I acted without clarity, allowing myself to be led by blind trust. I betrayed the father who spent his life protecting me. I am sorry. No tears, no drama, just words written as part of a sentence. Soon after, Caroline left Houston, relocating to Dallas to work for a small design firm. As for Gavin's parents, Charles and Miriam, they lost their home when the bank foreclosed on the mortgage. The Timber Lane apartment where they had lived for 20 years now bore a foreclosure sign staked into the yard. They moved out of the city, staying with relatives in Galveston. Their old church, St. Peter's Chapel, held a prayer service for them, not to defend, but to comfort what remained of the Holt family name. One afternoon, Lauren visited me, bringing 2 cups of coffee and a thin file. "It's over, Robert," she said softly. "Justice is complete. Time to close the file." I looked out the window. The sky was calm and oak shadows stretched across the wall. "I have no file to close, Lauren. Only memories, and memories aren't stored in court records." She said nothing for a moment. As she left, her voice dropped to a whisper. "You did what needed to be done. Sometimes closure doesn't come from forgiveness, but from preventing repetition." That night, as the house settled into silence, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and took out an old sheet of paper, the blueprint of the first bridge I ever designed in 1985. In the upper corner, a faint reddish stain remained, the trace of blood from Thanksgiving night, when the porcelain plate grazed my temple. I never cleaned it. The bruise had faded, but the mark stayed, proof that loyalty had been tested. I laid the blueprint on the desk, running a hand over it. "Proof of loyalty tested," I murmured. "No one understands the cost of justice until it's paid with their own family." My phone buzzed. A new message appeared. 4 words. "Dad, I'm sorry." I looked at the screen, then turned it off. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. An apology born from collapse carries less weight than silence earned through truth. I switched off the lamp and sat in the dark. Outside, the wind moved through the oaks, carrying a faint whisper like the breath of Linda, my late wife. I thought she would understand. Peace is earned, not inherited. The following Christmas, Timber Hollow glowed softly under rows of golden lights. Winter winds swept through the oaks, carrying the scent of cinnamon and burning wood from distant chimneys. I sat in the living room, the fireplace alive, a cup of coffee steaming beside me. Linda's old radio played Moon River, the song she loved every Christmas morning. In this house, everything had returned to its rightful order. No more arguments, no more voices cutting through silence. Only the sound of time itself. Slow, fair, unbroken. On the table lay a white envelope, sealed with the red stamp of Harris County. I opened it, the first restitution check in the 3-year schedule. The printed line read clearly, Certified Payment, Holt versus Whitmore. The ink was still fresh. The paper smelled faintly of metal. I placed it in the oak drawer beside the old blueprint, still marked with that small trace of blood. 2 things, one from justice, one from memory, lying side by side as a reminder that some bridges don't need to be rebuilt, only kept from collapsing. I stood and poured more coffee. On the wall, framed beneath glass, hung the design of the first bridge I ever completed for the city of Houston in 1985. Firelight shimmered over the curved steel lines like a steady heartbeat. I stared at it for a long time. Justice doesn't rebuild bridges, I said softly. It makes sure the next one doesn't collapse. Outside, snow drifted down, dusting the roof and the stone path. A postal truck stopped at the gate. The mailman waved, and I nodded back. On the porch, the small brass plaque engraved Whitmore Residence, established 1987, gleamed beneath a fresh coat of varnish. I sat down, opened my black notebook one last time, and wrote a final line. Silence can be punishment, but it can also be peace. I closed the cover. The leather spine gave a quiet sound, like the closing of the last case in a life. Candlelight flickered across Linda's framed photo on the table. I smiled, lifted my cup. We kept the house, I whispered, and our dignity. Outside, the Christmas lights blinked along the fence. The house was silent. No voices left, only another sound, softer and deeper, the sound of peace. If you've ever been looked down upon, used, or betrayed by those you loved, simply for your kindness, remember, justice doesn't need noise. It needs patience and proof. Let this story remind you that silence isn't weakness. It's the first stage of strength. If you believe justice can arrive quietly, follow, turn on notifications, and comment the name of your city. So I'll know that somewhere out there, people still believe. Justice doesn't need applause, only a bridge strong enough to stand through every storm,